All right, let's see. By raise of hand, how many of you are feeling sleepy? All right. So I'll try to make this as entertaining as possible. This is not a technical event. The talk, you're not going to have to use your engineering brain. This is a career leadership, me telling you about myself, kind of. This is just me being narcissistic for 40 minutes. I'm just kidding. I'm not narcissistic. I did this talk, a little bit of background about this talk, and also a background about the background you see in the slides. I didn't bother too much updating it, because since I made the slide, I'm just using the same. I made this talk for an online conference that is organized by some of my friends back home where I'm from in Morocco. It's called BlaBlaConf, and it's fully in Moroccan dialect, 100% in Arabic. And they just sent me these slides, and what you see in the background are actually typical Moroccan things. So the little squares are like that's what we put typically on walls as like tiles, and what you see in the bottom are usually tents that we use actually to hold events. So they created this background and they send it to me, so I write my slides on top of the same template, and they just didn't bother changing it. Then a few months later, I was mentoring on a program in France, and I just gave the same talk. So the first time was in Arabic, the second time was in French, and this is my first time giving this talk in English. So either it will go amazing or horribly wrong. My name is Abdel. I guess if you have been to either of my other two talks or one of the one I have tomorrow, you already know who I am, so I'm going to skip this. I'll go straightly to disclaimers. I'm going to tell you my background in a bit, so you're going to get to know me a lot. This 7 tips or 7 stories, or this me telling you about my career applies to me. This is stuff I learned doing the things I did, considering the circumstances I had to go through, considering who I am and where I'm coming from. I'm just telling you what I have experienced, and hopefully 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 of these lessons will be useful to you. Before I get going, I want to kind of get to know you a little bit. So how many of you here are students? Raise your hand. 1 person, 2 people. How many of you have 3 years of career in the tech industry? 5 years of career? 7 years of career? 10? 15? 20? How many of you experienced mainframes? What are you doing here? I'm just kidding. Let me start by generalizing a little bit. The term senior engineer means everything and nothing. It always means something in context. Somebody could be a senior engineer after 2 years, after 4 years, after 10 years of career. Somebody could become senior engineer after 15 years of career just because they are very terrible at what they're doing. It all has to do with how fast you're learning, how fast you're able to adjust, how fast you're able to actually provide value to the people that work that's around you. But just for the sake of simplifying, let's just say that generally speaking, you're a senior engineer anywhere between 4 to 6. You might argue with me that that's not the right number, but just for the sake of simplification, let's say that anywhere between 4 and 6 years, you could consider yourself senior enough. So my background is the following. I studied masters in software engineering in Morocco. I actually started working in Morocco. If you have never known anything about Morocco, it's a beautiful country and you should go. The second thing you should know is that the Moroccan tech industry is about 90% consulting. So we have all the big companies that you know of, Atos, Capgemini, I forgot names. All the big companies, all the consulting firms. IBM has a consulting company there. Oracle has one, all of them. They have presence in the country. The main reason is because we speak French, especially people my generation. And there is a huge industry in France and in Quebec in Canada. So there is a lot of outsourcing happening from those countries toward Morocco. When I grew up and when I was studying my master's, all my friends who were like older than me, they went and studied and worked in consulting. And the more they talked about it, the more I hated it. So I made sure that I would never have to work in consulting ever in my life, which I actually failed at later in my career, but we'll talk about that later. So I started looking around. When I was doing my master's, I actually started doing this, public speaking. I was part of the local, I don't know if you know this, but Ubuntu or Canonical used to have a Linux user group. They called them Canonical Logs. They were basically just communities. It's like a JOG or a GDG. They're just communities of people who like Linux. So I started participating in those, and then I started going to what we call Linux Days, or used to call Linux Days, which is just a bunch of people who like Linux and who specifically don't like Windows. They get together and they teach each other how to use Linux. And That helped me quite a lot in building a network of people around me and allowed me to actually find my first internship and find my first job, which was not in consulting. And my first job was in a company which was a data center. Now, I said this earlier in my talk. Working in a data center is not something that you typically associate with somebody coming from the tech industry and studying software engineering. I actually worked in a company that was the first career-neutral data center in the country. What does career-neutral means? Essentially, it means we were not specifically linked or associated to any of the ISPs or any of the internet providers in the country. We were neutral enough, such a way that you can bring your servers, host them in our data center, and we will connect you to any of the 3 major ISPs we have in Morocco. So that allowed us to actually be neutral enough, such a way that we could host anybody because we don't care, right? So we started getting a lot of work. I spent 2.5 years there. I did everything. And by everything, I mean from writing code, managing Linux servers, to wiping the floor, to painting walls. That's called a startup, right? 2.5 years in a startup allowed me to learn a lot. I'm going to stop here and add another disclaimer. Working in startups is not for everybody, and I'm not advocating for people working more time than they should or burning themselves down more than they should. This is not what I'm advocating enough. Our industry is already full of problems like this. I don't want to add to the problems. What I'm trying to say is, and this is lesson number 1, if you are implicit about how you want your career to be, you can make choices early in your career to get to where you want to be, instead of just following what everybody else is doing. When I was actually studying masters, my class was full of people that wanted to be Java developers. That was their main goal. I want to be a Java developer. So they were studying Java, they were drinking Java, they were sleeping, eating, waking up to Java. And that's, in my opinion, having this strong opinion or this strong focus on one thing that you want to be limits the opportunities you will get ahead of you. Being explicit about the fact that you're open and that you want or you are willing to try out, to test things, to do one thing and just figure out I don't want to do it and do something else. Actually, my internship, which was required for me to validate my master's, was an Android developer before Kotlin existed. So I was actually a Java developer, and I freaking hated it. Not because of Java, because of the company I worked in. That's because when you are also starting early in your career, it's not only about the technology, it's about the company, the people you're going to end up working with. It's a combination of things, right, that will make or break your first job. So being open-minded, having this idea of I will try whatever I can, helped me quite a lot. So that's the startup time. Then in 2013, July 13, if I remember, August 13, 2013, I got an email from somebody claiming that they work for Google. So they reached out to me. They said, we saw your LinkedIn profile. My LinkedIn profile at the time was data center engineer. This was my title, because that was what I was doing in this company, right? So they sent me in the email. They said, we want to consider you for an interview. I was like, well, I don't really know, because I didn't really know if this person was from Google. I thought it was actually a spam email. So I took a couple of days to figure out on the internet, is people from Google actually send emails that says @google.com and stuff like that. And then I replied. I said, yeah, I'm interested. So I had the interview. I had actually 7 interviews in total. We don't do this many interviews these days, but that was what they were doing at the time. So I did 1 interview with the recruiters, two interviews online with 2 different people. They flew me into Belgium, and I did 4 interviews on site on the same day, one following another, 45 minutes each. It was brutal. So July, or a week later, I got the job. A week later, I quit my old job, moved to Belgium, moved into a new country. Theoretically, I moved to what I thought was the south part of Belgium, where they speak French. If you don't know anything about Belgium, Belgium has 3 official languages. French in the south, called Wallonia, Flemish in the north, called Flanders, and German on the east side toward German borders. So I moved to the French part of Belgium. I thought it was French. It wasn't. It was actually Belgian. They speak very different. French Belgian and Belgian Belgian are completely different. Or French French and French Belgian are completely different. So I joined a team or a data center that was established 3, 4, 5 years before me. That's Google biggest data centers in Europe is in Belgium. I joined that team, that office. That office existed for 3 years. They hired a bunch of people. They built the entire data center from scratch. They were all from the region. They all knew each other. They were all friends, and they all worked together, and they loved each other. And here I am, a new dude coming from Morocco, just being parachuted into their team. They freaking hated me. I am an extrovert. I talk a lot. I am extremely loud. I chat with everybody. I like speaking. And the most importantly is that I moved to a new city where I don't know anybody, so I spent a lot of time at home reading documentation. I spent a lot of time learning things. And it took me some time to figure out why these people did not like me. I thought they didn't like me for me. I figured out later they didn't like me because I was intimidating. Because I came in and a very short period of time, I managed to learn a lot of things that it took them 3 or 4 years to learn by just spending time reading documentation. I had Netflix, so don't worry, I was not just only doing that, but I spent a lot of time doing that. So 6 months later, Google used to have a performance cycle which lasts 6 months. So every 6 months, we used to do something called PERF, performance review cycle, where you as an employee, you get to a tool and you write a self-assessment. You write 4 or 5 big bullet points about what have you achieved in the last 6 months. Your first performance review cycle in Google, traditionally, you will always get the same score, which is meet expectations. Meet expectations is average. Basically, you just joined, you have spent 6 months here. Well, you did what you're supposed to do. So it's a really bad sign if you get anything below average. And I got below average on my first assessment. It was need improvements. Because everybody was giving bad feedback about me. Everybody was saying, this guy, he doesn't listen. He's like, want to learn. He want to do things, blah, blah, blah. Turns out, later on, when I learned what my first assessment was, and I went to talk to my manager, and my manager recommended me to go talk to people, I went to talk to them, and I went to talk to them individually. So I talked to the first person, and he was like, well, you are young. I was like, okay, sure. You have time. And I'm like, okay, sure. You are willing to learn. I was like, sure. And then he shut up. And I'm like, so what's the problem, right? What's the issue? And he or she, this person could not articulate what the problem was. So the lesson I learned from this, and this is something I still apply today, give people actionable feedback. Don't just tell them what the problem is. Tell them what the problem is and what do you think the solution should be. Right? Everybody can complain. We can all complain. We can all bitch about anything and everything. I'm sorry, this is going to be recorded, so sorry for using profanity. But it's important to give people things with actions, stuff they can do to improve, right? Just telling people what's wrong with them is not helpful to anyone. It's not helpful to them. It's not helpful to you. It's not helpful to anybody around you. And generally speaking, it just makes you look like an a-hole. So then I had to adjust. I had to learn. I had to make sure that I don't offend or intimidate people. And this is actually a lesson that helped me quite a lot when I moved to Sweden. Because moving from Belgium to Sweden, one of the first things I was faced with is talking to Swedish people. You're extremely introvert. You're extremely, I'm not saying you're closed off. That's actually a mischaracterization of Swedish people. Introvert basically means people take time to open up, take time to get adjusted, take time to get to know you. And that lesson from 2013, I applied it back in 2017 when I moved to Sweden, where I took my time to know people. And actually, this is probably a bonus lesson. Taking your time to know people helps you build more profound connections. And this is something that I am applying today. This has kind of impacted my personality as I was growing, such a way that today, when I go to the US, I find Americans extremely fake. When I go to America, I go to Starbucks at 8 a.m. in the morning, I show up and I'm like, hi, and then somebody's like, hi, how are you today? I'm like, just shut up and give me a coffee. It's so frustrating because if you are asking somebody, hi, how are you? You're just expected to give an honest answer, right? And I don't want people to tell me how are you in a fake way. I want them to tell me, hi, how are you? If they care really to know how am I. You know that the joke about Swedish people is that if you walk to a Swedish person and you tell them, hi, how are you? They will actually tell you everything wrong in their life, right? So this is actually true. Just because they expect that that's a genuine answer. They expect that you actually care about them and not just like, hi, how are you? What can I give you today, right? Anyway, so That's hopefully lesson number 2. First promotion, first promotion happened like a year after. Promotion essentially means going from one level to another, more money, more stocks, more bonuses, and more responsibilities, more work, right? Promotion in different companies is done differently. In some companies, it's basically your manager deciding, okay, you are now on the next level. It's as simple as that. And that's actually a problem from a pure leadership perspective, because promoting people based on relationships means that if I don't like you, I'm never going to promote you, right? So different companies try to come up with frameworks for how they handle promotion. And we do have one. It's arguable whether it actually works or not, because the problem when you are putting in place a framework for engineers to advance their career, engineers will try to hack the fuck out of that framework. If you are promoting people based on how many, let's take an example. If you're promoting developers based on how many features they're releasing, you better be sure they're just going to do nothing but release features. They're never going to fix bugs. They're never going to refactor libraries. They're never going to make sure that everybody else's life is easy. They're never going to mentor anybody. They're never going to help anybody. They're just going to be building stuff and shipping it. They're going to be going into your ticketing system, picking up the easiest low-hanging fruits, writing code, pushing code to production, and then in 6 months or 1 year or 2 years later, they're going to sit down with them and they'll be like, look, I implemented 60 features. Now you have to promote me, right? So this is a problem if you are in the management or the leadership space. So you have to be mindful about it. And to be very honest with you, I have no idea how you can solve this. However, as an engineer, use this system to your advantage. Understand how promotion, understand how career advancement works in your company. Sit down with your manager. Ask them, how can I get to my next level in the career? If you care. If you don't care, that's fine, right? It's also okay not to get promoted. It's also okay not to get more money. It's also okay not to get more salary. That's completely fine. Well, it's not okay, but if you choose to, that's fine. But if you are really intentional about progressing your career, just be intentional. Talk to your people. Talk to your management. Ask them. Ask them, what can I do? Be intentional. Be open. Be honest. 4 years later, 2017, I got promoted to the highest level in that job I was doing. So I went from level 1 to level 3, and that's it. That was the maximum I could reach in that job, in that role, right? So the only way out was to either switch to management, which in my case, because I didn't have management background or management experience, we have a program inside of Google that is designed for those who are interested in management to become managers. That program lasts for 3 years. You get mentored by a manager for a few months. Then you get some people reporting to you for a few months. Then you do your first perf cycle with them. And then you do your second perf cycle with them. And then 3 years down the line, you become a manager. And when I learned about this program, I thought, this is my wildest nightmares. I do not want to do this. I do not want to be a manager. I do not want to manage people. So I had to find a different way. The other way was to take another non-technical role, program management, project management, stuff like that. I did not want to do that. I wanted to stay in the individual contributor track. So I had to find another way. Luckily, I work in a company that has opportunities, so I could actually transfer to a different place. If I wouldn't be working for Google, I know I'm coming from a very privileged point of view, saying, oh, I just found another job and moved, and you can do like me. That's not everybody. Not everybody have this option. Changing company is also okay. Trying something else is also okay. Quitting your job and building that next idea startup around Gen AI with your friend is also okay, right? It's probably not going to work. It's probably going to fail, but it's also okay to try. Failure is part of learning. So what I'm trying to say here is, I know that it's not easy for people to advance their careers, because career is not the most important thing in your life. You also have personal life, and you have family, and probably you have kids and stuff like that. But if you are really intentional about it, if you are really care, you can find a way. You just need to think outside of the box. Think creatively. Figure out what do you want to do. The other lesson I want to leave with you today is, in our industry, people think that the individual contributor, manager, director, VP, senior VP is the only natural progression, right? The reality is, we, on average, spend about 40-ish years in our careers, right? If everybody aims to follow this path, eventually, at some point, we're going to have more directors than people doing the job, right? We cannot expect everybody to want to become a manager and to want to be a director and to want to be a VP, et cetera, et cetera. So following an individual contributor technical track is also possible. It doesn't work in all the companies. There are companies where it's not possible, but it's also an option. You don't have to copy everybody else. You don't have to be like everybody else. That's what I'm trying to say here. First mistake. I moved in 2017 to Sweden. I joined a team called Professional Services, which is a consulting group inside of Google. So that's basically Googlers working on Google Cloud, by the way. So that's essentially people being paid by Google, but we work as consultants with other customers. So I actually spent quite a lot of time in Malmo between 2017 and 2018. I was working with IKEA, like probably half of you in the room. I spent quite a lot of time I spent more time than I ever wanted in Helsingborg, because IKEA has an office there. I flew quite a lot to Ängelholm. I actually flew to Ängelholm more time than I have ever flown to any other airport in the world, which is wild. It's a very small airport. The problem with working in consulting, if you're not used to it like myself, is that consulting requires more than technical background. It also requires people background. And while on the surface people think I'm a people person because I come stand in front of an audience and tell them things, I am not. Do you all know this book called Surrounded by Idiots? I have a problem with this concept of the fact that we're all surrounded with idiots. So, and believe me, our tech industry is not only filled of brilliant, clever, smart minds. There are people who are not that smart. They're probably good technically, but they're not smart, and they don't know how to conduct themselves in a way that makes you respect them and give them the benefit of the doubt and trust them and lead them to things. So working in consulting means you have to be able to deal with different personalities. And I realized that's a weakness I have, right? That's something I cannot do. So there was this project with this group of, I'm not gonna name them, but I ending with S. And I had to work with these people, and at some point somebody pissed me off so much that I actually sent an email, CC'd my manager's manager, my director, the director on the other side, a bunch of people. The email was extremely loaded. I was very frustrated, and I just blew up. I turned off my computer, and I started playing my games. My boss called me, and he was like, "What the fuck did you do?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, I'm frustrated. This thing is not moving. People don't understand me." And that was my first mistake. If you ever feel you are so frustrated that you are gonna potentially say something that will hurt people, just shut up your laptop. Seriously, just turn it off, move from the keyboard, do something else. Go walk the dog, go make a lasagna, go out, listen to a podcast, make the laundry. You probably have a pile of laundry you haven't made since last week anyway. Go do the dishes, do something, right? Do something that is not a computer, that is not a keyboard. The more frustration is actually a very vicious loop. You get pissed, you try to express yourself, people don't understand you because you're not able of articulating yourself, you get more pissed, and it keeps going on and on and on until you point where you just explode, right? Just don't do that. So if you are pissed off, just walk away. A few years ago, I started struggling a little bit with the concept. So I'm a firm believer personally that in our industry, you are able to pretty much learn anything as long as you have the fundamentals of computer science nailed down. As long as you understand the basics of programming and algorithms and distributed systems and network and security and databases, and you understand more or less about how all of these things works. This is what we typically refer to as the T-shape, right? You have one deep knowledge in one thing, and then you have a lot of kind of high-level knowledge on a lot of other things. And speaking of the fact that earlier I said we're surrounded by people who don't know what they're doing, I can assure you, you're going to meet people who doesn't know the fundamentals. I can assure you, you'll meet people who doesn't understand how DNS works. Yeah, right? You know the joke? It's always DNS. That's because people don't understand how DNS works. Anyway, so I was following this model where I would only pick up the things I need to pick up as I need them. I would only learn stuff when I need them. I don't follow tech publications. I don't read TechCrunch. I don't read The Verge. I don't read what is this called? The new stack, all these like tech publications that are always talking about the latest and greatest in Gen AI and Kubernetes and containers and security and all this stuff. I don't do that, right? I just pick up the things. I need to pick them up. I read news just to be aware of what's going on, but I don't read tech publications. And I'm going to open a big parenthesis right now. 99% of tech publications are opinions, and I don't want to read other people's opinions. So I don't follow trends. I just read about the things I need to read about now and try to use my knowledge, my basic understanding of how computers work to decipher how this thing works, right? I got to a stage in my career about 2-3 years ago where I started struggling. I started having this feeling that there is so many things happening around us and that I'm not able to catch up. I'm not able to keep up. I am like being overwhelmed. I am not aware of that latest JavaScript framework, which probably since I started this talk, there have been 6 of them already. But like, I like to joke about front ends a lot. I'm sorry if you get offended. I'm not meaning you harm. I'm just joking. So, but like, I really got to the point where I started struggling, and I read a book, or I got not really a book. It's a theory called the Dunning-Kruger effects. Have you heard of that? It's the effect or the phenomena that says that the more you know, the more you think you don't know, and the more you don't know, the more you think you know. Essentially, the more you don't know anything, the more you think you're a genius, and the more you know stuff, the more you think you're dumb, right? It's like a reverse psychology effect. That actually gets on your head when you get to a stage where you are selective about what you are trying to learn, and you also have very good knowledge and you have very good experience. And that's what I call the learning struggle curve. When you are young, you learn quite a lot of things, and it keeps going and going and going, and that curve at some point eventually levels up, and it levels up for a period of time. And that's the struggle period. When you are thinking, am I an idiot? Am I actually not able to understand what this piece of documentation is trying to tell me? That's when you are not supposed to let go. That's when you are supposed to like keep going. Even if you feel dumb, it's fine. No one cares. Even if you this is all in your head. Probably people around you don't think you are dumb. People around you probably don't. People around you probably think you are smart because you have experience. You are able to actually talk in a smart way. You are able to explain things in an easy way. But it's just because this stuff feels so easy for you, you think I am an idiot, I am dumb. You're not. You're just experiencing probably the Dunning-Kruger effect. You're experiencing the feeling that you think you don't know enough, but you actually do. So just keep at it. Just keep hammering, keep going. Probably find a new way to learn. I used to only read articles. Now I like to listen to podcasts or watch videos or watch other people tell me how things work or come to talks. Like find new ways of learning. There is actually a thing, again, I'm going to open another parenthesis, and I hope I'm not going to be over time because I'm the last person between you and beers. So there is this, in pedagogy, in education, there is this thing called the learning styles. Like there is actually a framework that teachers use where they think that people have 4 learning styles, which is like audible, so you like listening, like visual, you like looking. The 4th one is you like practicing, like doing things, and then the other one is you like reading. Actually, that's like one of the most stupidest theories about humans ever. There is a lot of research that have been done about this topic, about the fact that we're not only one style. We're not only learning in a single way. We like to learn multiple ways. There is a YouTube channel called Veritasium. I highly recommend you go look into it. There is actually a video where the YouTuber conducted an experiment in the streets that can easily debunk this concept that we only fit in one learning style. Try to learn differently. Try something else. Watch videos, read documentation. Listen to a podcast, do something different. That's the lesson. There is a link, I'm gonna share my slide later. There is a link by one of my favorite humans on earth, Stefan. He's a friend of mine from Berlin, where he actually wrote about his struggle, his learning struggle, his curve, like the stagnation curve, if you want to call it. I get asked very often when I do podcasts about what is the one thing you would have changed about your life, or what is the one thing, if you could go back 15 years, you would have learned, and that's writing, learning how to write. I really, really like writing, but I don't know how to write properly. Writing is extremely hard. It's more difficult than talking. I can stand here and talk for hours, but writing your ideas in a way that will be engaging and comprehensible is extremely difficult. If you're early in your career and you can take any sort of help, whether that's courses, journalistic writing, you have time and you want to try it out, I guarantee you it's going to be fun, and I guarantee you you're going to learn something. So that's the article. It's in this thing called Cube Story. I'm going to share the slides later and you can find it. Last lesson, I guess, is don't be a know-it-all. We all have people around this in our life. We have the people that know everything about everything. It's probably not a colleague. It's probably your aunt or your uncle or somebody in your house, probably your father or your mother, with all respects to fathers and mothers. Just don't be the person that know it all. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's fine to not know things. We cannot know everything. We are growing up in an era where we're extremely specialized as human beings, as human species, outside of the tech industry. We are becoming more specialized, and we're becoming incentivized to learn one thing and become very, very good at it, such a way that we cannot just simply know it all. And the tech industry is extremely huge. So it's okay. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's fine. No one cares. And last but not least, if there is one thing I learned from getting to the position where I am right now, is that as a senior engineer, person in your team, tech lead, whatever you want to call it, your value to the group of people you work with, to the business or to the company, is not your technical knowledge. It's your experience doing the things you've been doing in this last couple of years. Let me explain what I mean. The value you are bringing to a team is the fact that 6 years ago or 7 years ago, you tried that framework and it didn't work. It didn't scale. It introduced a lot of problems. It was not easy to test. It was difficult. So when you get to a position when your team is deciding, should we use this technology versus this technology? Should we use this framework versus this framework? The value you are bringing to the table is the fact that you can say, let's go with this because I know it's going to work. It's not the fact that you know that thing. It's not the fact that you can write code in that framework. That's not something that the group cares too much about, because that's something somebody junior in the team can go learn and do. It's the fact that you actually know the architecture, the system, the technology, the framework that actually works, and you for sure know the things that doesn't work. And the last thing I want to leave you with is learn how to delegate, right? You're not gonna, we only have 24 hours a day. We have to work for 8 hours, do stuff for 8 hours, and hopefully sleep for 8 hours. So you're not going to be able to do a lot of things in 8 hours. So it's fine to let other people do stuff. I'm actually taking a very, very explicit, I'm implementing this right now explicitly in my day-to-day life. I let other people do things. I don't always, when I see stuff on chat that I know the answer to, I don't answer them, because somebody else will know how to answer them. Because most probably you're going to answer a question and there will be another question, and you answer a question, there will be another question, and that end up somebody booking 30 minutes with you to learn to pick up your brain, right? Or whatever the fuck that means. So just, it's okay. Ignore stuff. Don't do everything. I will leave you with this, 4 of my favorite reads that helped me a lot. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I think everybody knows that one. Atomic Habits is a very good book for building tiny changes for remarkable results. Range is probably my favorite book. This is a book about how specialization and generalization pretty much works, and how being a generalist is actually better than being a specialist in most times, and surrounded by idiots. I think I don't have to talk about that book. And with that, thank you very much. I hope this was useful.